Hi, my name's Tim with ABC Acres in Hamilton, Montana. As you know, Matt took off last week. We wish him, his wife, and lovely child all the best with their endeavors in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. I'm coming to you today, August 1st. It's an absolutely beautiful morning. Slightly overcast, but we're expecting sunny skies this afternoon. Highs in the mid to upper 90s. Ouch. One of the things we've been noticing over the last year or two since we've been doing these videos, 2.5 years now, doing a video every Wednesday, is people are taking interest in the projects we have installed on the farm. Our tree belts, chinampas, crater garden, fedge, bee area, goat pig paddock systems, asking us a lot of questions here and there on how we did it, what's the design considerations. And so I thought we would jump in today in a multi-part series looking at different projects and really dissecting them and showing you how we choreographed it based on our context. So I'm standing here today in one of our tree belts in our food forest that covers an 8-acre pasture. We installed this project back in 2014, so it is now 4 years old and it's doing great. We have chestnuts and we have nectarines, pin cherries, evergreens. You can see all of it, and we'll talk about all of that. But what I wanted to start about today was context as it applies to ABC Acres. And you remember Matt did a video some time ago on really defining your context, and I think that's important. But what we're going to talk about today is how do we come upon this design? What did we observe? How did we do a site evaluation? And what did that look like in steering our design? So stay tuned as we dive into the finer points of our site evaluation here at ABC Acres on how we designed and created the tree belt system. So what we're looking at here is a still picture taken from, Google Earth, and it is showcasing our 8-acre pasture, which is highlighted by a white border. I've also shown the compass there so you have your directions northwest, south, east, and some observations that we were taking in over the course of a 12-month period. We noticed that the prevailing winds were dominantly coming out of the south, south-southwest, where we have two big draws directly to the west of us, Roaring Lion and Sawtooth. And that's where our summer thunderstorms were coming from. And then during the winter months, obviously, most of the time, your winter storms are coming out of the north, and that's certainly what we did notice. So again, those were your directions. Those were the wind aspects that we saw. In addition to the winds, we were picking up a large presence of wildlife, both deer and elk populations. Deer herds during the winter can get up to upper teens, low 20 count. The elk herds can be anywhere from 20 to 120. And so they were coming out of our zone 5 to the west. And we kind of felt like, boy, if we put a fence in there, we'd have more damage and more upkeep in the long run. So that was just an observation of what we saw with the wildlife. We also had a neighboring house off the property, represented by the yellow rectangle to the north. And that was something that ideally we didn't want to pick up. So how could we design to bring a little more aesthetic pleasure to what we saw day to day? So taking this all into account, the prevailing winds, the dominant winds throughout the season, as well as the wildlife migration coupled with some aesthetic appeal, we also noted the sun angles, sunrise, sunset, and from there we were able to paint a picture of what we were observing and how we wanted to design such a system. Okay, so pan forward to present day, and what you're looking at there is the overhead installation of our tree belts. You'll notice one that runs east to west on the north line, as well as one that runs north to south on the east line. And then we have those belts kind of like in a Charlie Brown diagonal pattern that run across the 8-acre pasture. If we take a closer look at some of our observations, we can see how this design came to play out. The prevailing winds, the summer storms, the winter winds, the design of the tree belts are all perpendicular or slightly perpendicular to those winds. So let's say we look at the cattle herd represented by the orange oval in what we call pasture 3. You can imagine that if that herd was wintering there, that the tree belt would be a block to those winter winds coming in and lessening the stress on them. At the same time, we irrigate through these 5 pastures, and with the prevailing winds that we get during the late spring through fall, as well as the summer storms, those winds are reduced. Thereby, what irrigation we do put on the fields or what precipitation falls from the sky is able to maintain, to saturate in, and have experienced less evaporation because they're not constantly being beaten by the seasonal winds. Furthermore, which led to design, the yellow color that encapsulates those tree belts actually represents the fencing. So think back to our picture earlier where we had the deer and elk herds that were coming out of our zone 5 to the west. We do not have a perimeter fence there. The deer and the elk are free to come through that pasture as they please without affecting perimeter fence. We do use hot wire on those perimeters when the cattle are rotated through them throughout the season, but ultimately there is not a permanent fence, thereby lessening our maintenance or year-to-year costs for repair. As summer turns to fall this year and your mind starts going towards your 2019 projects, an excellent place to start is with a site evaluation, with observing the area for a few months, or better yet, a year, to see what is going on. And from there, you can start to choreograph a design that will work for you for productivity, but at the same time lessen the maintenance and costs associated with the same. I'm trialing a brand new cordless mic, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the audio coming through. Right behind me, in between our belts, we have one of our mobile chicken coops. I don't know if you can hear them, but they are laying eggs right now. Happy hens. So in reviewing what you saw, the overhead of the 8 acres and the observations with regards to site evaluation, the winds, the sunrise, sunsets, any sort of visual benefits, visual impediments, things that we wanted to address, wildlife corridors, those type of things, we designed and set up these tree belts. So that was the premise that went into how we choreographed the design. Next week, we're going to be taking a look at the infrastructure that it took to build this. Specifically, we're going to talk about irrigation systems, how we irrigate the various different trees, Australian pines, pin cherries, chestnuts, the lot. We're also going to look at our fencing systems. What did we put in place to ensure that we could have balance between livestock and wildlife for the protection and the long-term maturity and productivity of the tree systems. And we're also going to be looking at our Staffix energizer system that we utilize to move our cattle through the system with a paddock shift hot wire setup. So that'll be for next week. I appreciate your time today. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be happy to address them. And as always, happy growing. Shall we go? Bing, bong. Let's go.